Good afternoon, Spch 100 and YouTube. My name is Robert Seizure, and I will be telling you a little bit about feminism, specifically more modern feminism. How many of you identify as feminists? And do you know the textbook definition of feminism? No. I pulled it from 3 sources. We have Google. It's the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of political, social, and economic equality to men. From Oxford Dictionary, it's the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of equality of sexes. And from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, it's organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. As you can see, they're mainly all just focused on women's rights. But because of these definitions, actually back in the 90s and early 2000s, I was a feminist myself. Because I thought they believed in equal rights between men and women. I think Barry Krush sums up these definitions quite well in his book. Would the real First Amendment please stand up? When he says, when mythology is crowned as king, the text abdicates the throne. And that's what we'll find. We'll find that the text changed because of feminism. Feminists have power. So first wave feminists gave us the right to vote. They were leaders against slavery. Second wave feminists gave us NOW, which is the National Organization for Women and Equal Employment. And they were also the starts of women's study and gender studies programs in school. And then the third wave was all about changing the view of women and giving them power and sexual liberation. And the fourth wave is about gender identity and LGBTQ stuff. In these 2 pictures, this is the first wave of feminism. There's some of the founding ladies of feminism. We have Sojourner Truth on the left, and on the right we have Elizabeth Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, which is cool. If you ever wondered what Susan B. Anthony looked like, there she is. They fought for the rights to vote and also the abolition of slavery from the late 1700s to the 1800s. They believed that you couldn't have women's rights unless all women had rights, so they worked very closely with the black women of that day, which is kind of interesting because it was a slavery time, but they pretty much connected slavery and women's rights together. They didn't believe in women's rights until slavery was abolished. This is second wave feminism. On the left is Betty Friedan, and on the right is Gloria Steinem. Friedan's book, The Feminist Mystique, published in 1963, basically started the second wave of feminism. Women were attracted to that book, and they liked the message in it. Gloria Steinem, on the right, was a columnist for New York Magazine, and in 1969 she wrote an article called After Black Power, Women's Liberation, and that really brought her to the limelight. They fought for unofficial equality, which were things that weren't in the law, but more like some of the viewpoints we had on women. They were the co-founders of the National Organization for Women, but the problem is they did have a lot of internal controversy about different rights that, one side would believe women should have these rights, the other side would believe they should have another set of rights. This era of feminism is also highly responsible for gender studies in schools. They started pretty much the program back then. They also tried to do international women's rights. They had UN conventions of 1975, but the problem was that they didn't ask the poor countries or the countries that were kind of down and out and the women that really had no rights what they wanted to cover. It was all about white feminism and feminism of the United States, which was a rich country, so it didn't really help at all. This is Madonna and Queen Latifah, if anybody remembers the 90s and the 80s. This was the age of women empowerment, sexual freedom, abortion, strong woman image, and there was a lot of gay rights issues also incorporated in it. And then fourth wave feminism. On the left is a crazy feminist. In the middle is a non-binary person. And then on the right is somebody they call Big Red, who's infamous for just trying to shut down anything that goes against feminism. This is where they created male privilege, patriarchy. Patriarchy was already in second wave feminism, but they really compounded on it with fourth wave feminism. Gender identity, this is where we got non-binary people, people that identify as a horse or an alien or whatever they want. They're down for shutting down arguments, and if you don't agree with them, then you're wrong. Is basically how they work. They push back a lot against men's rights because they believe women's rights are more important. They're fighting for resources between men and women because they want the resources to go to their things. And they always attempt to squelch free speech. So, like when men are going for their own rights, these people will go to a meeting and like pull a fire alarm or like blockade the entrance. And they're also prominent for pushing racial agendas. That's called intersectional feminism. And for me, I can't help but lump these ladies with the liberal left because they almost have the same agenda on everything. So feminists believe, by that definition, that if you're for equal rights, then you must be a feminist. But these are women that don't need feminism. Many reasons they don't need feminism is because it's counterproductive. Instead of providing women with power, it's saying, oh, you're too weak, you need us. So it doesn't actually give a positive image to women. And there's conflicts within feminism anyway. Some are pro-life, some are pro-choice. The views on intercourse are different. Some think like Playboy is empowering to women, some think it's oppressive. And then some believe in gender identity politics, while others believe in reality. Left is basically an image of one woman telling another woman how to lie about rape. I won't go into the details, but if you want to see the slides, there's always a link where you can ask a question. I'll send it to you later. On the right is the hypocrisy of feminism. These ladies are sexually objectified, but these guys, they're just having fun. Men's issues are often considered insignificant to the issues of women in other men's rights meetings. And often men's rights meetings are held by protests, like I said earlier. Often physically by feminists. Gender identity politics is actually a rather new thing. It's become so invasive and written in our education. If you remember one of the first tests we took. Are you okay, sir? Okay. If you remember one of the first tests we took, it asked about whether gender was a culture thing or a biology thing. And the correct answer was it's culture. Even though most people believe that's wrong. They say that men are advantaged, but actually, as you can see, they aren't. There is literally no law that gives men an advantage. On the contrary, there is actually plenty of things written that help women. And then women's lives, as we've partially seen with the election of Trump, like it says women's lives are better because of feminism, but as we've partially seen with like the election of Trump and stuff like that, there's a pushback against feminism and liberal ideas. We have both suffered because of feminist ideas. So these are some things that women have that make them more than equal to men. General integrity. If you've ever heard of female genital mutilation, it's outlawed in the U.S., but it's still okay to circumcise boys. Selective service. Women don't have to sign up for selective service to be able to vote. Men do. Parental rights. You cannot abdicate your right to your child as a man in every state in the U.S. without getting permission from the mother. However, the mother at any time could choose to have the child, abort the child, or due to safe haven laws, just leave it at a church or something like that. And also with custody issues, due to the tender years doctrine, which was an old doctrine that America and most places used to follow, custody rights are still, majority of the time, given to women over men. Unless men can like spend a lot of money and fight and prove that maybe he's just as fit as she is. It's basically men are guilty until proven innocent kind of thing. And rape. Men can be raped, but according to the FBI, it has to be a certain type of penetrative sex in order to consider it rape, which is why many men, even though they can be raped, they say it's not technically rape. If you look at WIC, Women's, Infants, and Children, it's actually in the name, Women's, Infants, and Children. There's no men there. The Violence Against Women Act, can you please turn off that fan, sir? Why isn't it a Violence Against People Act? You know, why is it only women that are allowed? In reality, men and women, it's about 50-50 on domestic violence. So, don't label me a feminist. On the left here is actually a poll by Huffington Post and YouGov. And Huffington Post is a pretty liberal and feminist organization. And you can see that only 20% of the people identify as feminists. And that's from a liberal side. So you can imagine that the numbers are actually probably a little bit more or less. And on the right-hand side, it pretty much sums up what I think perfectly. Why be a feminist and all the negative stuff that I've just talked about that associates with it, when you can just call yourself an egalitarian? Feminism took women from their children and put them in the workplace. Before the days of second wave feminism, men were the breadwinners and women were caregivers. And some women weren't and some men weren't. Whether this is right or wrong, that's up to debate. But at that time, the middle class was wealthy, they could travel, had multiple comforts, and time with their children, all on a single income. With the introduction of second wave feminism, women were told that they should work, they should be independent, that staying at home was domestication. And this has only helped corporations who now have a larger pool to deal with and pay less. Kids are now being raised and educated by the feminist education system, and most households require 2 incomes. There's 2 factors of the reasons why you now see girls actually surpassing men, both in college and in school tests. And there's 2 reasons for this. Boys and girls learn differently, but feminists have caused the education system to give an advantage to girls, so now it puts boys in a negative light. And then due to the change how it's taught, boys are considered rambunctious, and this is countered with drugs and other behavior correction methods. Why can't we just let boys be boys? I remember when I was in school, I had no problems. I even threw a book at the teacher, but they didn't give me ADHD pills. So this slide is the final slide that I'm going to show you. And basically, this sums everything up. In countries that are more equal and more fair, this is based on STEM, which is a huge talking point of feminists. Why more women aren't in STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. In places that are considered more equal countries like Sweden, Finland, Norway, we find that women making choices that don't fit the equality narrative that you would think. In fact, it's quite funny that only places that you can truly be a feminist is in a country with equality. Try to fight equality in Yemen, Jordan, or Pakistan. Not going to happen. A big topic that I was telling you is they push for STEM. And what this says is basically, this is USA right here. And it shows like around 45% of women, that have the ability to go into STEM fields, they go in. They have the ability and the attitude, like they think they like it. It goes down to about 35%. And then they also have ability, attitude, and personal strength. It drops down to around 25-ish%. But in countries like Thailand, Bulgaria, Latvia, where actually having those jobs makes money and makes you successful, they strive. They actually prefer those jobs. But the problem is when you tell women like, oh, we need to be equal, so you need to join STEM. They go in there, they don't like it, they lose money, they lose time on their education and degree, and then they end up failing and blaming it on men. I'm sorry, we have somebody having a seizure in the back right now. This sums up feminism pretty distinctly. Feminism is a first world issue, and the reality is, where feminism is needed, it can't be formed. And where it's formed, it isn't needed. Alright, thank you very much. These are my references. Do we have any questions?
What do you think is right and wrong with feminism?
What do I think is right and wrong with feminism?
And
Yes.
you discover everything about that.
Basically, the main thing that's wrong with feminism, in my opinion, why a lot of people go against them, is because they're mainly, it turned into anti-men. It's no longer pro-women, empowerment of women. It's more, okay, how can we make women better than men? Not how can we make them equal, which is why I think a lot of people choose not to follow feminism anymore or call themselves feminists, because they realize that feminism is more against men than for women. Any other question?
Do you know any feminists or friends with any feminists?
I do. I have some friends that are feminists, and actually I belong to a group that has quite a few feminists, and we're constantly getting in debates over politics. And it's really hard to talk with them because basically if I disagree with them, like I said earlier, I'm wrong. So they shut down an argument. They don't try to have an educational debate. They usually just shut you down right away. There are some out there that can, but most that I've interacted